I thought you started it. Hello, we are back. We are doing another day on our book club, in our book club, Be Holy for I Am Holy book club. And we are doing the beautiful visions we're reading of Anne Catherine Emmerich. She was beatified in 2004 by Pope John Paul II. So her visions were all authenticated, right? Or is that the word I'm looking
Yeah,
for?
I think not against doctrine and historically correct.
Yes. I need you for that because I don't never remember that.
Yeah, just those two things from
Yes.
my understanding, what I've read.
And we're still en route to the baptism. We're still not there yet. We have a couple more days to go, which is amazing. I love it because all these little things we didn't know about that Jesus traveled before getting to the baptism. So
And when you're
today,
doing your rosary on Thursdays, you're going to be doing the baptism for your first mystery. So you can put yourself there, because you can put yourself right before, as you start your Our Father, you can remember all these travels. So it gives dimension to our meditations on the rosary and on any other, if you're doing like a novena or something, it helps you, it gives us dimension. I love it. And
oh,
I
me too,
wasn't
me
one when
too.
we first started. I wasn't one. I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't like this mystic stuff. Even though I've had my own mystical experiences, I still am like, So I have to
I'm
tell
really
you
enjoying it.
this.
I'm really enjoying it.
I have to tell you that me too, because I wasn't originally for. I was doing it for Jeanette, and boy, oh boy, am I loving it. So just hang on. You're gonna love it.
Okay. So we are going to start now. It's called Jesus Rejects Three Rich Youths. He confounds many learned men in the synagogue of Nazareth. To the 5 followers of Jesus, 4 others were now added, relatives and friends of the Holy Family. I think there was a son of one of the 3 widows among them, and one from Bethlehem, who had found out that he was a descendant of Ruth, who had married Boaz in that city. Jesus formally received them to the number of his disciples. There were in Nazareth a couple of rich families who had 3 sons. In childhood, these later had associated with Jesus. They were now quite cultured and well educated. The parents, who had heard much of Jesus' wisdom and teaching, agreed together that their sons should today hear a specimen of it. They would then offer him money to let the young men travel with him, that they might profit by his knowledge. The good people had so high an opinion of their sons that they thought Jesus would gladly become their tutor. So the young men went to the synagogue with her, but the connivance of their wealthy parents and the Pharisees, all the learned men of the city, had flocked. They were determined to put Jesus to the test in every way. Among these men were a lawyer and a physician. The later, a tall, portly man with a long beard. He wore a girdle and had some kind of a badge upon one shoulder of his mantle. I saw Jesus, on entering the school, again blessing many children whom their mothers brought to him, among them some afflicted with leprosy, whom he healed. During his discourse, he was interrupted in various ways by the literary, who proposed to him all kinds of subtle questions, but his wisdom silenced them. To the lawyer's speech, Jesus answered most wonderfully from the law of Moses. And when divorce was spoken
Okay.
of, he rejected it entirely. Divorced husband and wife could never be, but if the former could not in any way live with the later, he might leave her. Still were they one body and could not again marry. These words of the Lord greatly displeased the Jews. The physician asked whether he could tell whether a man was of a dry, matter-of-fact nature or a phlegmatic disposition. Under what planets such a one was born? What simples were good for this or that temperament? And how the human body is formed? Jesus answered him with great wisdom. He spoke of the complexion of some of those present, their diseases and their remedies, and of the human body with a depth of knowledge quite unknown to the physician. He spoke of life of the spirit and how it influences the body, of sicknesses that could be cured only by prayer and amendment, of such as needed medicine for their cure, and that in language so profound and yet so beautiful that the physician in astonishment declared himself vanquished, and that he had never before heard such things. I think he afterward became one of Jesus's disciples. Jesus described to him the human body with all its members, muscles, veins, nerves, and intestines, their special functions and their various relations one with another, in general terms, and yet with such accuracy that his questioner was humbled and silenced. And
Was an astrologer. There was an astrologer present who spoke of the course of the stars. He explained how one constellation ruled another, how different stars possess different influences, and he discoursed upon comets and the signs of the zodiac. Jesus, in most appropriate language, treated with another upon architecture, with others of trade and commerce with foreign nations, taking occasion at the same time to censure severely the various fashions and frivolities lately introduced from Athens. He condemned likewise the games and juggling now in use among them, and which were also spreading throughout Nazareth and other places. These games were likewise a product of their intercourse with Athens. Jesus stigmatized them as unpardonable, since they that indulge in them look upon them as no sin. Consequently, they do no penance for them, and therefore cannot be pardoned. Oops. His hearers were ravished at his wisdom. They begged him to take up his residence among them, offering to give him a house and all that he needed, questioning him also as to why he and his mother had removed to Capharnaum. Jesus replied that he could not remain with them, and he spoke of his mission and the duties it imposed. In answer to their question as to why he had gone from among them, he said that it was because his desire to dwell in more central locality, etc. But they did not understand his reasons, and they were offended at his rejection of their offer, which they thought a very fine one. They looked upon his words and as the offspring of pride, and so they left the school that evening. The three youths, who were about the age of 20, greatly desired to speak with Jesus, but he would not allow them to do so until his 9 disciples were present. That annoyed them. Jesus told them that he insisted upon having witnesses to what he might say to them. When at last they were admitted to an audience, they very modestly and humbly laid before him their own and their parents' wishes that he would receive them as his pupils. Their parents, they said, would remunerate him. And as for themselves, they would bear him company in all his labors. They would serve and help him. I saw that Jesus was troubled at having to refuse their request, partly for their own sake, and partly on account of his disciples, for he was obliged to assign reasons for his refusal, which they could not as yet comprehend. He replied to the youths that he who gave money to obtain something aimed at gaining some temporal advantage, but that whoever would follow him must abandon all earthly possessions, must leave parents and friends, and that his disciples must neither woo nor marry. He laid down many other hard conditions, so that the young men became very much discouraged. They argued that many of the Athenians were married. Jesus replied that they, the Athenians, acted rightly and in accordance with their laws, but that his doctrine was to establish fully that for which theirs only paved the way, etc. With this remark and the bidding them take time to reflect, he left them. The disciples were intimidated by his words. His teaching was so severe that they could not understand it, and they grew faint-hearted. But on the way from Nazareth to EMMERIC'S, they bade them not despond, that he had good reasons for talking as he had done, that those youths would only at some distant day, and perhaps never come to him. But as for themselves, the disciples, they should follow him calmly and be without anxiety, etc. And so they arrived at EMMERIC'S. I do not think he will again go to EMMERIC'S, for the great talk and excitement had arisen in Nazareth on his account. The inhabitants were vexed at his not remaining among them. They thought that he had acquired all his knowledge during his travels. True, they said, he was a very clever and extraordinary man, but for a carpenter's son, he is rather conceited. I saw the three young men returning to their homes. Their parents were very much displeased at the objections Jesus made to receiving them. The sons chimed in with the parents, and all talked at random at their indignation against him. On the following day, the three youths went again to Jesus and begged once more to be accepted. They promised him perfect obedience and faithful service, but Jesus again dismissed them. And I saw that their inability to seize the meaning of his refusal troubled him. He spoke then with his 9 disciples, who by his directions were to go first to a certain place and afterward to John. On the subject of those whom he had dismissed, Jesus said that they desired to follow him for the sake of what they might gain, that they were not willing to give all for love, but that they, the disciples, sought for nothing. Consequently, they had been received. He spoke again in significant and beautiful terms of the baptism, telling them to go over to Capernaum and say to his mother that he was going to the baptism. He charged them likewise to speak to the disciples, John, Peter, and Andrew, about John the Baptist, and say to the last named that he, Jesus, was coming. So The next one is Jesus with Eliud and the leopard. So we'll talk about that after we discuss. What I noticed in this reading, Jeanette, and I don't know if you noticed as well, but the language was, remember, she's writing this in the 1800s. And often you'll hear some words, a few words, but there were so many today. Did you notice that? Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of like words we're not used to. I don't know if we
I
pronounced it
know.
right, but we tried.
I know. Look, we do the best
Yeah,
we can, guys. But it's
yeah.
not just in the language, but in the sentence structures. They kind of talked backwards back then. And so there just seemed to be a lot more of that today.
Yeah, they used the word latter or later. I don't know how you
It's
would
latter.
pronounce that.
That I know
Latter
is
or
it's
later?
modern and it's latter. So yes, it's used
Latter.
today.
So I pronounced it wrong because I said
But that's
later. So,
okay. That's okay because
ah,
if it were one T, it would be later, and that's what you're used to seeing. If it has two T's, then what happens is it makes that a short A instead of a long A once there's two of a consonant. That's what happened. So I want to bring up the map. So it's going to take me just a sec. Yeah, so I pulled the map up so that when we get there. But here we are. He has now 5 followers and then 4 others. So he's at 9. Of course, we know it's supposed to be 12. So he's not quite at the 12 yet. They're relatives and friends of the Holy Family. And then she thinks there was a son of one of the 3 widows from Bethlehem, who found out he was a descendant of Ruth, who was married to, I think that says Boaz, and you know,
yes, Boaz. Yeah, that
yeah.
was the husband that Ruth married.
Okay,
After
yeah. So
her
so that
husband died, she traveled and
it's
with
just a
Naomi.
miss. Okay,
Yeah.
they just misspelled it here. So, but luckily Jeanette knows, you know, that Ruth is Boaz. So now Jesus formally received them to the number of his disciples, these extra 4. So this is kind of a significant moment here that she gets to see. And they were in Nazareth, and a couple of rich families who had 3 sons. In childhood, these latter had associates with Jesus, and they were now quite cultured and educated. So I wanted to come over here and look. Here's Capernaum, they're talking about today, and here's Nazareth. So what they're saying is, in Nazareth, there are a lot of rich people, which we already knew, but I like to look at this so that we can see, you know, where we're at here in the map. So these parents with these 3, they're all rich, and you know, rich people often, they know where to get favor, they know where to find things, they're very intelligent, but they were going after it for the wrong reason. And it seems that he's letting them know they would offer him money to let the young men. Now, he took money from the women like Mary Magdalene and the women that were helping him, but he would not take their money
Well, he
because
can
their
see their
motive.
heart. He
That's
can see their
right.
hearts. He was
That
divine too. You know, he was able
motive.
to see
And
their
God
heart.
can see our hearts at all times. So
Yes.
we can never fool him. Just
Can
remember
never
that.
hide.
So try to get your heart in union with his, because we're not going to be able to hide it from him. And that's kind of what's going on here. So the good people had so high opinion that they thought Jesus would gladly become their tutor. Even though they're good people, they don't recognize what Jesus recognizes, which is why we can easily be deceived, even if we are in the Holy Spirit and doing our prayer and praying, we still can miss motives. So, you know, here they are, good people, and they're missing that. So then
That's
the
why you
young,
got to make prayer a part of your daily routine, like
yes,
brushing your teeth, like eating. It has to be a part of your
all
daily
day,
routine so it stays with you forever. Forever.
yes. and for the day. So even if you do your morning prayers an hour, still during the day need to find times, because
Yes.
so fast those demons can come in and knock, say something to us and get us redirected. So we have to be very, very careful. So here, they were wrong, and I don't know what this Confounds with their wealthy parents. I guess it means together with their wealthy parents. And they were determined to put Jesus to the test. And these men were lawyer and physician. And so here they are, professional people, which, a lot of professional people go into church in adoration, they give the amount, and they think that they're doing everything right, and that poor little homeless person on the road, that they are much more righteous because they give money, they go to church, and this homeless person maybe is a drug addict, maybe is whatever. They think they're better than them. They think they're better. But God sees their hearts, and when that drug addict and that homeless person comes and maybe is limited by their genetics for whatever reason, God sees their heart, and they may be above that person. They may be the one going to heaven. Be careful how you judge people. We have to. I always remind myself of that when I get annoyed with people, because I get easily annoyed. I have, when you have depression and all that kind of stuff, you get easily annoyed. So you have to constantly, remember that's a weakness that you have, and you must try to work around that and be careful with it. So he wore a girdle and some kind of badge on his shoulder, his mantle. So he had his, his, awards, or his status in the community right up front to let everyone know he was important. And she saw Jesus entering the school and blessing the little children as the mothers brought him, and Jeanette healing the leprosy before the baptism even started.
Yes.
So, now let's see, if the baptism is about to start, that means he already did the proclamation. I have to look at his lifetime thing. So he's already healing. He's healing before his baptism, which is when his ministry supposedly officially
He healed
starts.
when he was a baby in his water, the leprosy of that one guy. So, and
right.
Mary was also healing people too, remember?
With
We
the
read
water.
that Mary also healed. But the actual
With her
official
water.
healing, the official, when he officially started, was
Which goes in the
the
gospel.
wedding. Yeah, that's different. That's
that's when his, and so he has the baptism, the wedding, which they say is when he's officially started, then boom, the proclamation. So he's healing before he even gets there. But like Jeanette said, she used his bath water for healing. So you're right, Jeanette, thank you for pointing that out. So he was interrupted. Here he is praying. Now I don't know what this literati means. It doesn't, literati meaning it's well-educated people who are interested in literature. Okay, so he was interrupted by, I guess, the writer types and all that kind of stuff. So he but his wisdom silenced them. Hold on a second. So here he interrupted. He was interrupted by them, and they're proposing, and they're trying to trick him with all these subtle questions, but his wisdom silenced them. You can't fool God, okay? They don't know that he's God, but they can't know that yet. But they realized there was nothing. So the lawyer's speech, Jesus answers wonderfully from the law of Moses. And when divorce is spoken of, he rejected it entirely. Divorce is plain not accepted. It is all what the only reason they did the acceptance was for hard-heartedness. That doesn't mean it's acceptable. Just so you all know, divorced husband and wife could never be. So, like in my case, I married someone who had already been married and divorced. I didn't know this, but no matter what, my second marriage, his second marriage, my marriage with him was never legitimate. And I've confessed that and all, but I didn't know that, but still. So divorced husband and wife can never be.
A lot of us are going to be in trouble when we get there with that one.
We are. Look, I didn't know. And that's the thing. You have to be so careful. But if the former could not in any way live with the latter, he might leave her. So you can leave her, but you can't remarry. That's the point. And I guess that's it. Still, they were one body and could not again marry. These words of the Lord greatly displeased the Jews. I knew a doctor, he would not, and it made the news. He wouldn't give her a get. For back then it's called a get. And he was like, no, I'm not going to sin for you. But I guess a court or something ordered her. I don't know what happened, but eventually she got it. So the physician asked whether he could tell whether a man was of a dry or matter-of-fact nature or a phlegmatic disposition, under what planets such was born. See, they're going into now temperaments, and Jesus answered them with great wisdom. He spoke of the complexion of some of those present, their diseases and the remedies, and the human body and the depth of knowledge. Could you imagine? And quite unknown to the physician. He spoke of life of the spirit and how it influences the body, and sicknesses that could be cured only by prayer and amendment. I mean, and of much needed medicine for their cure, and the language so profound yet so beautiful. I can't imagine him saying these things. Like, I mean, wow, he was telling them exactly.
And not only was he saying this, but before he was saying this, he cured these lepers. So, right. They saw that, he had the touch. He's very prayerful.
He did.
He was very special.
And what does the physician that's trained say just then? The physician, in astonishment, declared himself vanquished, that he had never before heard such things. Well, how that's being used, he declared himself vanquished. So,
and then he followed him. So I guess vanquished meaning that he was dumbfounded and he was surprised, and so he became one of his disciples.
Defeated thoroughly. So he believed him. You're right. He believed him.
He became a disciple.
And she says, I think he afterward became one of Jesus. So I'm wondering, could that doctor be Luke? Could it be Luke? Don't you wonder? So Jesus described to him the human body with all its members, muscles, veins, nerves, and could you imagine special functions and their various
wow.
I mean, with such accuracy that his questioner was humbled and silenced. A doctor who knew more, right?
He was the creator. How could he not?
That's right. And so that's what's so fascinating about this. Could you imagine being there? So here there was an astrologer present who spoke of its course in the stars. He explained how one constellation. So here we are talking about astrology and zodiac, which I always look at for personality. I never look at for fortune, but Jesus, in the most appropriate, treated with them upon architecture, with natural trade taking occasion, and at the same time severely the various fashions and frivolity introduced from Athens. He condemned likewise the games and juggling now in use among them, that were spreading throughout Nazareth and other places. Remember, Nazareth is more the elite, more the rich, And these games were likewise a product of their intercourse with Athens. So Nazareth is becoming corrupt, it sounds like. Jesus stigmatized them as unpardonable, since they that indulge look upon them as no sin. We're not supposed to look to astrology. Consequently, they do no penance for them, because so they never confess it. If you've ever gone to a psychic, you need to confess that. Because if you don't confess it, you can't be pardoned. So his hearers were ravished at his wisdom. They were like, oh, I want to know more. I want to know more. They begged him to stay and take up residence, offering him a house and everything he needed, questioning him as to why him and his mother removed from Capernaum. And here's Capernaum, guys. Here's Nazareth, here's Capernaum. And they're like, well, why did you and your mother leave there? So they had gone down toward Nazareth, and he said, because he could not remain with them. He spoke of his mission and duties imposed. Remember, he's on his way to the baptism. Yes, Jeanette.
What you said, that you have to confess it, I understand that, but a lot of us that don't remember it when we're in a confessional at the very end, if you deliberately didn't say it, but you knew it in your mind, but you just left it out, that's a different story. But if you just forgot, because there's so many sins that we do that sometimes we forget. We just go with the few of the main one. But at the end of the confession, you say, for these and all my sins, I am really sorry. You kind of add the other sins that you've done that you didn't remember at the time, that you forgot, but it still it still means that you were forgiven. It doesn't mean that you're not forgiven.
Let me tell you what Father
I'm just saying that because that's what the priest told me.
Let me tell you what Father Bowman said. He said, if you have something that is bothering you.
Oh, that's a different story. That's a different story.
And I remembered sin, and I'll feel like I was being scrupulous. I remembered sin, and I wasn't sure if I confessed them. So I wanted to be sure. And he said, that's okay. So personally, I feel if you forgot something and you remember later, that's your conscience telling you to confess it. So my suggestion is, if you forgot your next confession, go and do it. Because Father Bowman said that's good that you're coming back to do that. And it's perfectly okay. Just say, I'm not sure I confess this, so I just want to confess it now. It is from the past, but I want to confess it now. Personally,
you can do that, but just don't freak out, because a lot of people, like, if you say that to me, I'll start freaking out, because I'll start thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I remembered later after I went to confession that I didn't say. Oh my gosh, does that mean that I gotta write it down, remember it for next time? Because if something comes up, you're covered. But if you absolutely is bothering you, oh yes, of course, because that is what that's what the priest is there for. But
not just
we are
if it's bothered. But he said, not just if it's bothered. If it comes to your mind, that means it needs to be confessed. That
I understand that, but also on Divine Mercy Sunday.
Right.
If you've been to a Divine Mercy Sunday, and that one sin was, if that one sin was like from 10 years ago or whatever that came in your head, if it's bothering you, yeah, do it to make you feel better. But you don't need to, because on Divine Mercy Sunday, if you followed everything, you're good.
Okay, but Divine Mercy Sunday,
that's my sense of it.
But Divine Mercy Sunday is not just a blanket. You have to confess when you do that. So
I understand that, but you don't have to go with like 50,000 sins, a big list, because that's what we have.
My suggestion is,
that's fine.
If you've done astrology in the past and you went to a psychic, and you never confessed that, my suggestion is, Jesus said, this is severe. He's telling us this. This is a clue. When you get a clue, don't say, oh, it's covered. No, When you get a clue, if you've been to a psychic, my mother used to go to them at Casadega. I went to them. Since this now, I want to be covered, and I'm going. I'm not just going to take the chance that, oh, it's covered. No, I'm not. You can. I'm not. I'm just saying. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I'm going to make
fine.
sure.
We just have different views on
I
that, but
just
that's
want to
fine.
make sure, because it says here,
That's
because
fine.
I believe Jesus's words. It's
Oh, I do
unpardonable.
too. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that, sometimes the
unpardonable.
confession part of it is sometimes covered.
Unpardonable. But it's
I'm
unpardonable.
going to ask the priestess next confession, because
It's
that just bothers me.
unpardonable. I believe God over any priest. If I'm seeing here it's unpardonable, oh, you could be sure. Other ones I'll be like, okay, I forgot ones that I did wrong. But on this one, since I've heard this, that this is, I didn't know that if you go against the Holy Spirit, that is another unpardonable. So I'm like, oh my gosh, did I ever do that? If I'm being scrupulous, I don't care. I'm going to make sure. It's too important. It's too important to let it go. It's just too important. When I hear God say right here, it's unpardonable. They cannot be. I'm like, okay, I went to psychics. I never confessed any of the going to those psychics. So I'm going to be sure now that I do personally. Do what you guys think, but right here, this is telling us. So then his hearers, whenever Jeanette doesn't like something, she leaves. Don't do that with God. You don't leave when you don't like something. That's what the other people that didn't follow him did. So here, they begged him to take up residence, but he and his mother removed, and he said he couldn't stay, that his missions and his duties imposed. Why? Because he was going to the baptism. If we're asking God for something, I was just asking God for something and he didn't grant it. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? Guess what? When it involves another person, sometimes they have to learn a lesson. My prayer was not answered, and I found out why. Because this person did not put that what God needed them to do for him to grant my prayer, because it was entangled in someone else's. So just remember that when you're praying. And if God does not grant something, it may be because that other person's free will is a part of it. So I now realize when I'm praying for someone else, their free will is somewhat involved. And now I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm praying for this person, but their free will can interfere in it. So then what I'm going to say is, please let whatever my guardian angel tell them something so that they can get on board. Like what I was praying for someone, they weren't putting the effort in. So God said, I'm not going to grant that. This person needs to know that. And so because I wasn't offended that my prayer wasn't answered, but I was astonished, right? Because this miracle prayer, I always answer. I only ask for certain things. But guess what? We got a second opportunity. So that's when the light bulb went on. I'm like, oh, okay. That's why he didn't do that. So I fully expect he's going to answer it, and I hope he does. So anyway, I'll let you guys know. But anyway, so here.
It takes longer than you expect to get an answer.
Sometimes,
it took me, my biggest prayer I prayed for every single day for 4 years.
Yes,
when I thought it was just never going to get answered, and I just kept praying it anyway because I just did, God answered so big. So,
that's right. That's right. So we
Sometimes
never know. We have to be careful, but we're always trying to figure God out, aren't we? Like if I say this prayer, maybe he'll, I'll put the effort in. God, I promise I'll do. I get you do that bargaining. So in answer to their question why he had gone from among them, he said his desire to dwell was a more centrally locality. Well, where is the central locality? We're talking Nazareth and Capernaum. And where is the baptism done? In the Jordan, right?
Yeah.
And where is the Jordan? It comes out from the Sea of Galilee. So he couldn't go back there. Here's the Jordan, right? The Jordan is going down here. So he needs to be centrally located because that's where the baptism is. And where is he on the way? He's grabbing people on the way. He can't just answer a prayer when he's on his way to the mission. Remember, the mission is to save all of humanity, and your prayer may not be on the way. That
So
is
actually, so actually, where he stopped was, yes, it was the Sea of Galilee. But was it Capernaum or was it Nazareth?
well, they were coming from Capernaum going toward Nazareth.
So it was in Nazareth where he did the baptism.
Well, no, it's in isn't it the Jordan? So he's going.
Oh yes, and
he's
it's
going
in the Jordan,
through.
but what city?
He's going through. He went through Capernaum and all these things, and then he went through Nazareth. So now he's on his way, and they want him to go back to Capernaum, and he's like, "No, I'm on my way here." You see what I mean? You know what I mean? Oh, okay. She's looking at something. So, okay. So his rejection of their offer, they thought a fine one, and they were offended. You see, I was offended, and here it wasn't on the way to the whole mission. So I think that was so interesting. They were offended, just like I felt. I was not just, I was a little bit offended, but more confused. But I was a little bit offended, I have to admit. So see, it when we're involving someone else, their free will. So always remember that when you're praying, and also always pray for the best. So for that person, because we don't know what's best for that person. We have to ask God to make that. So they looked upon his words and as their offspring of pride. My offended with that was a little bit of my pride, and I'm always fighting my pride daily. And like the spiritual director said, Jeanette, you're going to fight it until your dying day. And I'm like, okay. So I'm fighting that. And so they left the school that evening, and they were so mad. And then the three youths who were the age of 20 wanted to speak to Jesus, but he wouldn't allow them until his 9 disciples were present. Here he goes with another group trying to get something out of him that he can't give them, and they're annoyed. So not only were these people up here offended because he wouldn't go back to their locality when he's telling them I can't because it's in the wrong place and I'm going towards something. Same thing is happening here because of their motive. He could not grant them, he couldn't allow them, because the 9 disciples, number one, had to be present, and number two, he also knew their heart. Like Jeanette was saying, he could see their heart. So that annoyed them. And Jesus told them that he insisted upon the witnesses, that he insisted upon having witnesses to what he might say to them. He's there to teach. These 3 years are to teach his disciples so they can spread it to the world. He's not just there for individuals. Everything he is doing in the gospel is for us all to see, and that they write down is for us all to see. So he's not just doing things for nothing. He needs his disciples to see that. So when at the last time they were admitted, they were modestly and humbly laid before their own parents' wishes, he would have received them. But then what happened? Their pride got in the way here, and their parents' pride. So timing, this tells us that timing is everything. Well, if we don't get what we want and then we get our pride up, you see, we could change our motive. So be very careful in changing your motive for wanting something. Their parents said they would remunerate them. Let's see, remunerate means, let's see, remunerate. Their parents would remunerate, not into meal, in Bible, in Jesus. Okay. You must not muzzle an axe, remunerate. They wouldn't requite him. It means reward. Wait a minute. Remunerate meaning. Let me just look. Not in. Okay. Remunerate. Money paid for. Oh, their parents said they would pay him. That's where it went wrong. It wasn't their pride. They said, okay, we'll pay you. And they would bear his company in all his labors. They would serve and help him. What did Jesus do? Saw that Jesus was troubled at having to refuse their request, partly for their own sake, partly on account of his disciples. So see, he has two reasons here. For he was obliged to assign reasons for his refusal, which they could not as yet comprehend. They couldn't understand this. So he replied to the youth that he who gave money to obtain something aimed at gaining some temporal advantage. Before, he thought it was more acceptable. Now it's temporal because of the money. But that whoever followed, like if like a rich person's giving to the thing and given to the church, and they say, well, I should get granted because I give my tithes. No,
That's different because they're trying to buy something with their money instead of just giving it as tithing.
Nope, still the same.
Some people give it as tithing.
Tithing is good. Tithing is good, but be careful.
But they're not expecting anything in return.
Stop. Tithing.
Well, I can't give you my point of view.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah, it sounds like that.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. What I'm trying to say is be careful if you change your motives for something. If you say, I deserve this because I tied to the church, no, wrong motive. That's what I'm saying. So that was what I meant. And you were misinterpreting what I was saying, and then you were saying something else. So that's why I was saying stop. So it's not, no, your opinion is very, why I'm not doing this unless it's your opinion here, because I would not want to do this without you. I wouldn't do this without you because your opinion is, you help me. You help me. You're my other half with this. So no, I apologize if it appeared that way.
It's okay.
That way. I meant it like we can't change our motive. Yeah, we can't change it. So he said, you must abandon all earthly possessions. So he's telling them this is the high bar. That's what he's telling them. So his disciples must neither woo nor marry. And there he goes into the marriage. And, which is interesting, Jeanette, because in Catholicism, our priests aren't supposed to marry, but yet we did let some in, like the Anglicans, like Father Longenecker, because the church, who has authority to allow them to come in, and that's why the church can annul. That's why the church can, but still, it's like, eek, eek, eek. I get like nervous. But I still like Father Longenecker. That's what we do, the spiritual warfare rosary. I can't imagine God wouldn't love that. So I think it all depends, So we just have to use our own conscience and, that kind of stuff too. So he laid down many other hard conditions, and the young men got discouraged. God doesn't want us discouraged. We can't allow ourselves to be discouraged. So they argued that the Essenians were married. And remember, the old covenant is different than the new covenant. That's what he's kind of saying. He said they acted rightly in accordance with their laws, but that his doctrine, Jesus's doctrine, the new covenant, was to accomplish fully for which was theirs that paved the way. For this remark and bidding them to take time and reflect, he left them. He's like, okay, they need to figure this out. I'm letting them know, and they can either choose to accept it or not. So the disciples were intimidated. His teaching was so severe they couldn't understand it, and they grew faint-hearted. Jeanette, he's not talking about his followers, right? He's talking about those people. Who is he talking about here? Is he talking about the actual 9 disciples? The
disciples were intimidated by his words. His teachings was so severe. Yeah, the disciples, they were a little intimidated, but that didn't mean that they didn't accept it. They left. Yeah. They were just like,
they grew a little faint-hearted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Look at Peter. Peter also said,
Right.
what? You're never gonna die. He said, behind
Right.
me, Satan. He was
Right.
like disciplining them along the way. So that's
Right.
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to understand. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. So, but on the way from Nazareth to Iliud's, he bade them not despond. So then what he's saying is they're in between Capernaum and Nazareth right now. They're going toward Nazareth and then they're going to go over to the Jordan right now. See, Jeanette? Look,
Yeah.
they're going from here to there. They're almost
Oh,
there.
okay.
Then they're going to go over here to the Jordan. You see?
I have a hard time with maps and
I do
places.
too.
So this is really helping me remember.
That's what I'm
because I,
saying. That's why I
yeah,
did this, because
I
yeah,
didn't know where he actually,
I know
I
it
knew
gets
it was the
confusing.
Jordan, but I didn't know if it was Nazareth or Capernaum or where. So
Right. So it's helping us a little bit. Now
yeah, thank
we
you.
may not be perfectly right, guys, but we're trying to help figure
We're
it out.
trying.
Yeah, we're trying. Just remember, we're not experts.
You
We're
guys
saying
can
the truth.
help us on the comments if you
Talk.
have something
Yeah.
different. Definitely.
Yeah. And he
We
told them,
appreciate it.
yes, definitely. And he told them that he had good reasons for talking what he had done, and those youth would only at some distant day and perhaps never come to him. But for themselves, the disciples, they should follow him calmly, but be without anxiety. We need to be like Mary, and we need to accept what he says and embrace it, even if we don't understand it. That's what did it say, that prayer? What were we just, we were just saying? Without grumbling. What were we just praying without grumbling, Jeanette? We were just praying a prayer without grumbling. I think it was in our angel one the other night.
Yeah.
Pray without grumbling. We need to accept without grumbling and being anxious.
Well, you think of Isaiah 55:8-9. His ways are higher than our ways, way higher. So
and
we
that's what
can't
he's saying.
always understand things. We just accept them.
And
have
don't
faith.
get anxious. Yeah.
Yeah, we have
And
faith and we say, your will be done, just like Mary did. Your
Right.
will be done. When you ask for something in prayer, at the end of the prayer, you can always add, this is what I want, Lord, but ultimately your will be done.
Just like he did in the agony in the garden, to be our model. And so that's what this is saying, guys. And he's teaching his disciples this lesson, and they're going to understand later, the disciples. He's saying these guys may not understand, but you guys will, is what he's saying there. And so they arrive at Iliud's. I don't think he will again go to Iliud's, for great talk and excitement had arisen in Nazareth. So Iliud's is in Nazareth, Jeanette. Okay. They just got here to Nazareth in this trip. They just got here, and then they're going to lead over this way. So we'll get to see that. That's exciting. Cool. Yeah. So here the following day, the youths went again and begged once again. They're like, but I promise to be perfect, obedient, and faithful. They think that they can change God's mind. Don't we always go back and say, but God, but God, please, this time, but God, please. Sometimes it's not right for us, and we have to accept.
And sometimes we try to say, well, if you do this, I'll do this.
We bargain. We try to bargain.
We're not supposed to bargain.
We're not supposed to bargain. But and a lot of people think we do as Catholics. Our novenas are bargaining, but they're not. They're not.
It's a difference. It's a difference. They don't quite understand what we do. We make a sacrifice. We we say, okay, I'm not I asked for something extremely huge like 15 years ago, and I said, I'm giving up what I love the most, Lord. I'm giving up coffee forever. You help me with this, Lord. Please help me with this. I will give up forever drinking coffee.
But I still accept.
He did. He helped me. I never again drank coffee. But even if he wouldn't have, I still wouldn't have drank coffee.
You still would have. That's right. Well, good for you. Do you know how hard it is to give up coffee? That's like smoking.
I love coffee, guys. 15 years, no coffee.
that is impressive, Jeanette. That is impressive.
I didn't say it to brag. I didn't do it to brag.
But I didn't know that about you.
Example.
No. I know you're using this example, but I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that. That's impressive. So I'm sorry, but I'm impressed. Okay. So the sons, I'm not giving undue adoration. I'm just saying that, wow, because I know how hard it is to give up. Like, it was so hard for me to give up cigarettes. So I know. So
Yeah.
the son's child, I smoked for 9 years and it was so
I did
hard,
too. I gave it up when Bina,
so hard.
before I got pregnant with Sabina. Sabina's 30, so 30 years now I haven't smoked.
I'm going to tell you something. I feel terrible, but I gave it up. I smoked when I was pregnant with my first son, and I didn't have any sense. I was just a kid. I was in my teens. I was 19. And guess what? You know, when I gave it up, he was 2 years old, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want my son to be, oh my gosh, I don't want my son to be a smoker. He was 2 years old. I kept trying to get my husband to, I said, we have to stop for him because he'll become a smoker if we don't do this. We got to do this for him. You do things you sacrifice for love. Guess what? He kept saying, yeah, next time that. And he wouldn't, he couldn't. And there were 2 cigarettes. And I said, he's never going to give up, is he, God? I got to do it. 2 cigarettes left. I sat it there and I said, I'm never smoking again for my son. And I didn't smoke his whole growing up until he got older, until he got like in his teens. And then I started picking it up here and there for a few months at a time. And then I finally quit for good when my daughter, like I had already given it up, but a few times I would start a couple of months. And when I got pregnant with my daughter, I was like, oh, I can't smoke. So I stopped completely for my daughter. But my son is shorter. My older son, my younger son is like, he's 6'1". My older one is 5'8". So he's a whole 3 inches difference when they were then, and there's still a difference in them. And I hope he doesn't listen as he's doing blame.
No, I gave up everything, man. When Sabina, I don't know how I did it.
I'm proud of
Like,
you. Oh, is
no,
that
I
why
can't
you
do
quit
this.
for your daughter when your daughter when you were pregnant?
Yeah,
Good for you. See, we
yeah,
do for
completely.
that's what sacrifice is, love. Jesus gave up for us. We were sacrificing for our children. When you sacrifice in love, God will he just loves that. That's why he wanted love our neighbor, that second thing, love our neighbor. That's what that when we sacrifice that what Jeanette just said a few minutes ago, it's different with sacrifice. So okay, so the sons chimed in with the parents and they all talked at their indignation. They were indignant. Like I said, I felt a little indignant, but then I realized, oh God, no, I see now you had a purpose. And I opened my mind to it. Isn't it interesting that we are reading this and God said, see, he's telling me, see. So on the following day, the 3 youths, they come again. They begged once more to be accepted. They promised, and I saw that their inability to seize the meaning of his refusal troubled him. It made him feel bad. We make Jesus feel bad when we get indignant and he's trying to teach us something. Imagine how hurt we can make his feelings if we got to try to not grumble. So he spoke to his then
To
9
not complain. To not complain. Rumbling is like complaining, guys. Remember what happened in Moses's time? Remember what happened when everybody was complaining? We have no meat. What's going on? God took care of them, giving them meat, and then they were tired of the meat, and they wanted
perfect example.
And then he got really, really upset. He started zapping people. Zap, zap, zap. Well, he didn't do that now with Jesus.
No,
Jesus
but he's trying to get their attention. Yeah, he's trying to get their attention.
Whoa.
So listen, so you don't get zapped. Okay. Listen, my mom always said, like, if you have a car accident or something, sometimes God has to do something drastic to get your attention. Don't make him have to do that. Listen. He spoke with them as 9 disciples, who his directions were to go first to a certain place and afterward to John. So he had already sent them on to John the Baptist to get their baptism, because he needs them to be ready on the subject, because I guess things take, it has to settle in their soul or whatever. There was a reason. Everything God does is for a reason. Just accept that. So on the subject of those he dismissed, and that they desired to follow him for the sake of what they might gain, they were not willing to give all for love. Look, we were just talking about that, Jeanette, for love and the sacrifice. And you brought up sacrifice. That's exactly what he's saying. But they, the disciples, sought for nothing. Consequently, they had been received. So the disciples were received. These three were not, because they were not they were not coming from the right place, and they were trying to do the bargaining. He spoke again in significant, beautiful terms of the baptism, saying, you guys, this is where we're going, telling them to go over to Capernaum and say to his mother that he's going to the baptism. So he sent a message back to his mother, who apparently Mary is still here while he's here and going. I always wondered if she was at the baptism. This answers that, Jeanette. She was at Capernaum.
He was around the corner, because that's where
no
kind of happened.
She's all the way. Look, Jeanette, she's all the way up here. He sent a messenger. He's down here on his way over here.
On Galilee.
Yeah, he's on his way. Remember, look, here's Jordan River. This is Jordan River. Look, see?
Okay, so that's the Jordan, but Galilee then is a little city.
No, yeah, but and the Sea of
Galilee a city?
Yes,
it's not the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah, Galilee is an area. The Sea of Galilee, the Jordan
Sea of Galilee, it's because it's in Galilee, the city Galilee.
And it runs into the Jordan River, runs from it.
Okay.
So see, Mother Mary was not at the baptism. She's here at Capernaum, unless she jumped in a boat and ran down here. As far as we could see, he's saying, tell my mother I'm leaving Nazareth and I'm on my way to the Jordan over here for the baptism. Okay. So he sent a messenger and he tells him, go to Capernaum. So now we know where Mary was, Jeanette. I always wanted to know that. And was she there? Because the father comes out and says, this is my son. Listen to him. Okay, so he charged them likewise to speak to the disciples, John, Peter, and Andrew, about John the Baptist, and say to the last name that he, Jesus, was coming. So he's telling them he's on his way. Oh, I love it. Now, guys, Jeanette, when are we coming back? Monday? Jesus Monday. Eliud in the leper settlement, guys. He's going southward from the directions of Nazareth.
So when's the actual baptism? Is it after this?
Look, Jeanette, look what it says. Tomorrow, on Monday, we'll be saying he's going southwesterly direction from Nazareth. Where is that? Where is that? That means he's here and he's going southwest. He's going that way. How can he be going that way if he's going toward the river? He must be a little.
He might be doing a little detour because he wants to reach certain places.
Well, if it's saying he's like Nazareth, this is a dot, so this must include a lot of this. So maybe he's going a little bit that way to get on a path and to go here.
Yeah, he's going to different little towns to try to get more people to come to the baptism. He's trying to.
Because look, Jeanette, here's the Jordan.
Seeds out.
Here's the Jordan, and there's where he was. So he must, maybe he's hitting a little place over here and then going toward there. So he's saying, I'm on my way. I just have to make this one little place. So guys, that's where we're starting tomorrow.
He's being the piper. He's being the piper.
Yeah.
The Pied Piper, follow me.
Yeah. So you guys, that's where we're going Monday. So make sure you come back. And we love you. And we're glad you're here doing this with us. This is helping us all so much.
Yes, we're learning together because we're learning too. This is the first time we read it. So
and
we're learning along with you.
If you want to share something, tell us. We want to hear.
Yes, please.
All right, guys. Bye.